I'm very happy today to be talking to Father Roderick about Star Wars. Those of you who aren't familiar with him, you probably do know him. He was the priest who geeked out over the trailer for Star Wars. You know him in the Google year-end retrospective as the guy in the clerical collar screaming, Chewbacca! And I'm really happy to talk to Father Roderick today about Star Wars because I know nothing about Star Wars. The truth is, I've fallen asleep on it every single time I tried to watch every episode. And I know nothing at all about science fiction, except one thing. Firefly was really, really good. And Firefly was like a space cowboy epic. So same thing for Star Wars, right? Is that basically, it's basically the same sort of thing?
Well, it's the same genre. And it's definitely, Firefly had that kind of same sense of adventure, and it's fast paced. There's humor, but also has some serious undertones. I think the big difference with Star Wars, I would say, is that it was really a television series, and so it had a limited scope, limited depth. Star Wars is more of it's an attempt to create a mythology, to create a universe that has in which there's more than the adventures themselves. There is also these underlying themes and religious themes as well, and philosophical themes that George Lucas tried to kind of like wave into the story, and so that's, or weave into the story. That's something that I would love to explain to you, and give you a short introduction to that wonderful world of Star Wars.
That would be great, because I remember watching Joseph Campbell talk about the power of myth and bringing Star Wars into it. But again, everything Star Wars kind of, it just doesn't stay in my head. So I would be very happy to be tutored a little bit in Star Wars.
Sure.
Tell me why this is important.
Well, first of all, because it's an amazing cultural phenomenon. If you see the excitement about this new Star Wars movie, and probably its massive success, this might very well be one of the biggest movies ever. This has influenced not just this current generation, but also the generation before that, and that generation before it. I mean, you have the children, the parents today were the children back then when the movie came out, and they probably went to see it with their parents. So we're talking 3 generations of Star Wars fans, and it's not just an American cultural phenomenon. This has conquered the world. And so in terms of its impact on our entertainment industry, on, let's say, our popular culture worldwide, this is something that you need to know about to because I mean, the world is full of Star Wars, and it's hard to strike up conversation nowadays without at least knowing a little bit about it.
I know a little bit about it. I know this is a Wookiee.
Yes.
A Wookiee. This is my dog's chew toy. He likes Wookiees. This is also my dog's chew toy, but he doesn't like Darth Vader. A Wookiee. Now let me ask you: an Ewok and a Wookiee, they almost sound the same but backwards. Well, is a Wookiee just an Ewok with like a pituitary gland disorder?
Very, very perceptive. Actually, when George Lucas created his first movie, he wanted to have a planet full of Wookiees. But because of the constraints of technology back then, and also just the fact that nobody believed in him and he had almost no resources to create that movie, he decided to kind of reduce it to one walking Wookiee, just a guy in a suit. That was all they could pay for. And so when he finally got his success, and everybody was waiting for a new movie, for Return of the Jedi, he decided to recreate that, initial idea of a planet full of hairy, fluffy creatures. But then he was thinking, I already did one Wookiee, so that's going to be strange. Well, you know what? I'll just size them down, and I will just call them Ewoks.
Wow. So I kind of clued into that, even though it's obscure.
You're the first person. I mean, I've been with Star Wars for many years. You're the first one to tell me that actually the names are similar. Wookiee, Ewok.
Yeah. Oh, wow. That's so cool. Now I feel like a geek too.
You already had 10 geek points for Firefly, and now you got 10 more points for Ewoks and Wookiees.
My geek husband is going to be so proud of me. Okay, so joking aside about Ewoks and Wookiees, what is the biggest point to bring out of there? Where is, for example, because we're Catholic, we're Christian, we're always looking for the Christ image.
Yes.
Where do we find that in Star Wars?
Well, George Lucas, when he conceived Star Wars and was going from door to door trying to sell this idea to the various movie companies, and they all rejected him, he wanted to do more than just an adventure in the style of the popcorn matinees on Saturday morning that he remembered from his youth. Initially, he wanted to do Flash Gordon, but then he became more ambitious and he started to write this whole story. And he said in one of his interviews that one of the things that he wanted to do, he was a big fan of Campbell and that whole theory of the hero's journey, and he wanted to write a bit of a mythology, a modern mythology. He was very well aware that the generation of his kids didn't read the Bible that much anymore, didn't have much, weren't churchgoers, so they were kind of losing touch with that tradition that has always been part of mankind, to tell these ancient stories full of values, full of ideals, pointing people towards a certain spirituality. And he was convinced that you need stories to do that. Ideals and spirituality, it's not just a theory. It's not, you can't teach theology to a kid, but you can tell a story. A story sometimes evokes much more than dry theology, and that was his ambition, to create a mythology. And he literally researched like the common themes, and I think he stole a lot from Joseph Campbell for that. But he took a lot of these general themes that you find in a lot of those ancient religions, and created like small parts in his story where he could use this or that theme. And Star Wars is full of them, including, of course,
Luke Skywalker is the Christ figure.
You have several Messiah type figures, and Luke Skywalker is definitely the first hero that we encounter. Because the movie 4, A New Hope, was the first movie that he created. He didn't know that he would ever get the chance to tell the entire story. That's why after 4, 5, and 6, we get 1, 2, and 3. And Luke Skywalker is kind of the quintessential vocation story. It's almost visually inspired by the biblical stories about prophets, about John the Baptist, about Elijah. It's the calling. He's a simple farm boy. He lives on a remote planet. It's a desert. It's like Nazareth. What good, or Bethlehem? It's like it's nothing. What good could ever come from such a remote planet? And yet,
just like what good could ever come from Nazareth?
It's exactly the same thing. He's stuck there in his day-to-day grind of helping his uncle on the farm. We also learn that he, is kind of like an orphan. His parents are out of the picture. We don't know. He hears later on what happened, but at first he's kind of an orphan. And so he meets this old hermit, kind of a monk-like figure. Obi-Wan Kenobi literally looks like a monk. With his, brown robes.
Right.
And this monk tells him about something out there. Luke Skywalker is always looking at the skies, always dreaming about adventure, but stuck on that planet. And this Obi-Wan Kenobi tells him, I need you. I need you to go with me. Let's go to Alderaan. Let's help the rebellion. Let's fight the Empire, the evil Empire. And the initial reaction of Luke Skywalker is the refusal of the call, which is a typical element of every calling in the stories of the prophets. The initial reaction is always, I cannot do that. I have to help my uncle here on the farm. I'm stuck here. Why me? Go. If you need a hero, I'm not your guy. And then Luke Skywalker needs to discover that ultimately it's not just his talents that matter, but it is his openness to the Force, which is, of course, kind of, um, you could say, a derivative of the Holy Spirit, although it's an impersonal force and it's kind of a dualist in the Star Wars universe. But anyway, he has to open himself for an external force, and if he lets himself be guided by that force, then he will become so much stronger than he would be if he would only use his own forces. And that is kind of what we see in the Bible as well. The prophets are themselves very reluctant to answer the call, but then God tells them, well, it's not your words. I'm going to speak through you. It's not your strength. It's going to be my strength that works through you. So that's kind of the basic philosophy in that whole Jedi mythos that Lucas creates. It's knowing that by your own strength you can't accomplish much, and you're totally overpowered by evil. But if you open yourself to this greater force, then you actually might become a redeemer. So it's a vocation story with Luke Skywalker. That's a very recognizable religious theme, but it's one of many, because I've got a whole list if you want.
Well, we could do this, I mean, for hours and hours. It's fascinating to me because, as I said, I've connected almost nothing about Star Wars into my reality.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Yoda. What's the deal with Yoda?
Yoda is...
Because I don't get him.
Yoda is a little creature that lives on a remote planet, and we discover that despite his appearances, he's a small green frog-like creature. He is actually a very old, very wise Jedi that has lived for hundreds of years, and he is kind of he becomes the teacher of Luke. And so he has these little nuggets of kind of Buddhist-like wisdom, where it's all about focus and dedication and detaching yourself from your impulses. And Luke is very impulsive at first. And he wants to save the universe. He's ready to go, but he has to learn that he needs to learn patience. He needs to learn to not be a victim of whatever could lead to the dark side, which is, anger.
So Yoda's his formation guy. He's his novice master.
That whole sequence on Dagobah, on that swamp planet where Luke has to train to become a Jedi, is like seminary in the Star Wars universe. That's how I felt when I entered seminary. It's like, oh, I want to be a priest. Like, tomorrow, I'm ready. Just ordain me. And then, okay, over the years, you discover that, wait a minute, I'm not ready. I still need to become that priest. And I have to let go of a lot of things and well, just learn the ways of the Lord, just like Luke has to learn the ways of the
Force.
So
okay,
that's seminary.
So I don't want to, because I'm aware of time constraints. What's great about the new movie? How does it expand on this whole notion of a force of battle between light and darkness that goes on, that continues from generation to generation? I mean, I'm gathering that that's where we're at, right?
Yes, kind of the main theme in the entire Star Wars history is that there is this force, but people can choose how to use it. They can use it for evil, for selfish motives, or if they truly let themselves guide by the force, it will, create light. And so this whole theme of light and darkness and the choices of people that determine which side will win is very much part of the new movie as well. And that makes it very interesting because there are so many structural resemblances to what we've seen in 4, 5, and 6, and 1, 2, and 3. And every time it's kind of this tension of, there is this invitation to let yourself be guided by the light side, but there are also lots of people in the universe that will choose the dark side because it's easier, it's faster. It's like the broad, road instead of the narrow, difficult road to take.
And it's more glamorous as well.
The dark side is very glamorous. It's very quick, very powerful. But the thing, and this is one of the most important and most profound themes, I think, of Star Wars that is very biblical, is that ultimately choices have consequences, and you pay the price, and the world pays the price for the choices that you make, for the moral choices that you make. And so the notion of sacrifice is immense in Star Wars. It's all about this: do you really want to sacrifice your life to what is good? And if you dedicate your life to what's evil, it will also it could also take your life. And so with the original, the you know the prequels were about Anakin Skywalker, who was kind of like the young boy that might be the fulfillment of this ancient prophecy that there will be someone who will save the universe. But he got seduced by the dark side, by what is quick and easy, by his anger. He's consumed with the dark side, and he becomes like terribly evil. And yet, in the movies 4, 5, and 6, Luke Skywalker faces Darth Vader and converts him. That's the beautiful thing of Return of the Jedi. Everybody thought, if you're this evil, there is no redemption possible. Except for Luke, he thinks there is still good in him. And it is Darth Vader. By the way, spoiler if you've never seen Star Wars, it is Darth Vader who, in the end, saves the universe. I won't tell you how, but he becomes the fulfillment of that ancient prophecy. That doesn't mean... And so this is where it gets very close to what we believe in as Christians, as Catholics. The cross, the ultimate sacrifice of Christ, has already vanquished evil and death ultimately. However, we live in this kind of in-between time where people can still be lured into the darkness, and it's still up to us to embrace that redemption. In the way they tell the Star Wars stories, that's very much the same thing. Even though it seemed at the end of the 6th movie that evil was gone in the universe and the dark side was defeated for good, in this new movie we learn that there has been an awakening, hence The Force Awakens, and that, well, this dark power still has a certain enticing quality to it, and there are new people who are choosing the dark side. And so that means we have a new calling for new heroes who, and this is amazing, you might have seen the trailer, where you kind of learn that the younger actors, the younger generation that is going to take over the story now, they don't know anything about the Jedi. They think it's all fairy tales from long time ago. They think it's all made up. And it is Han Solo, who used to be the prototypical atheist, telling Obi-Wan Kenobi when he's training Luke Skywalker, oh, that's just fairy tales, just give me a blaster. And he doesn't believe anything of it. He is the one that, after having seen that the light side of the Force can save the universe, he's the one that tells these young new people, it is true, all of it. So he is actually a believer now, and he's kind of almost, I think, symbolically a metaphor of all the parents that are wondering if their kids will still believe in the future. If they will, what is so important to them will also be important to the next generation. And so it's kind of this.
And he's an evangelical witness. In a way, he's an evangelical witness in a way.
Han Solo is definitely a witness in saying it's not just a belief. He has seen it. He has seen what the Force can do, and that's why he is such a good kind of apostle of the light side of the Force. And
well, I'm really interested in something that you just said about how it seemed like the dark side was vanquished, evil was vanquished, and yet there's this reawakening. And so now you have a situation where, if there is good, if there is this overwhelming good, there must always be a facet of evil somewhere, because how do you have good? How do you know something's good unless you have evil? I mean, it's kind of that whole dichotomy between, what is good and what is pure, and how do you know the purity of it except to understand what is evil? Well, that's really pretty deep water for a science fiction film, isn't it?
Sure. Well, that's why it's so fascinating. The thing is,
I've missed out.
There are various theologies of the Force in the Star Wars universe. Kind of, we're talking fictional stuff, of course, but I think that George Lucas actually was much more kind of dualist in his vision of the Force. Is like he was always talking about there has to be balance. So it's more yin yang, you know, you've got dark, you've got light, and once the light side gets stronger, the darkness has to grow in order to bring balance, and vice versa. Whereas, of course, as Christians, we would say, no, 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 no. You know, evil is the absence of good. That's what Thomas Aquinas teaches us.
Right.
And so Thomas Aquinas is kind of the Yoda of the Catholics, I say. But the interesting thing is that J.J. Abrams, having more of a Jewish background, with Kasdan, who I think is a Catholic originally, they're modifying this whole idea of the Force. They're bringing back more of a kind of a mystical approach to it. Like, it's unclear what the Force truly is. What they don't really know what it is. They don't want to kind of spell it out. What they do know, or what the people in the story discover, is that ultimately it is the freedom of choice that determines what will happen. So you have a free will. The Force is not forcing anyone. It's always a personal choice that determines whether someone will turn evil or not, which also makes redemption possible, even for the most vicious, dark, you know, fallen people. There is always hope. And that's, I mean, I cannot say anything about this new movie, but keep that in mind when you see it, and ask yourself, what is going to happen next in movie 8 and 9? Is there still going to be redemption after what happened? Or is the light side going to win? Is the dark side stronger? You know, I'm thinking we've seen before that there's always this kind of David and Goliath relationship between the darkness and the light side in Star Wars. The light side is always very small, insignificant, completely overpowered by this Nazi-like, you know, empire, and yet it is through small people that open their hearts to the Force that the light side manages to win. And that's exactly what we will have in these next movies as well. And I thought it was amazing how they brought depth to this new movie. And gosh, I can talk for hours about this. We've scratched the surface. We've only scratched the surface. There is so much more to these movies.
Well, I really appreciate you giving me this little tutorial. I have to just say that, doesn't it seem wonderfully weird and coincidental that this story, particularly what you've just brought up about how there is always redemption, there is always mercy even for the worst, comes out simultaneously with the Year of Mercy? I mean, isn't that a little bit of boogity boogity there?
Who knows? Who knows? I mean, the Holy Spirit can use any tool, even you know, stories about Wookiees to bring people to God. That's kind of how I approach it. I mean, sometimes I get some criticism of people saying, well, shouldn't you be talking about Christmas? And I'm thinking, well, you know, this is just a language. These are just fairy tales. These are stories. But if we are if we use these stories to guide people to what inspired them, you know, this is a story about hope. We're living in the time of Advent. We're going towards, you know, the real force that awakens in that manger in Bethlehem. And I think it's a very, very easy bridge to build. So if that can bring in all these millions of Star Wars fans and help them discover the true source, the personal source of the light side, I would say, then, well, what more could you ask for?
No, I think you're absolutely right. I think that there's something remarkably wonderful, and you know, I kind of feel like there's a hand of something good going on here, but I tend to think that way around Christmas anyway. Sure. One more question.
Yes.
Really dumb. Boba Fett, what is that? And does it have anything to do with the Cuban idol of Babalu?
No, that's a coincidence. Boba Fett was just almost.
Oh, it's Boba Fett. It's Boba Fett. Okay, so I said it wrong.
No, Boba Fett is a bounty hunter who goes after Han Solo. And it was just a generic guy with a helmet, but he became so popular, to everyone's surprise. George Lucas was the one who was most surprised. And he's like, okay, I got to do something more with this guy because, well, it sells toys. So Boba Fett is out of the picture, and yeah, he might get his own Star Wars movie eventually. But really, in terms of the mythology, he's just a sidekick.
He's a peripheral guy. Okay.
Peripheral guy.
Well, thank you. I've always wondered about that, and now I'm really glad to know that I can say it correctly also.
Excellent.
This has been so much fun. I wish we had more time to talk.
Well, there will be many more Star Wars films in to come, so let's just make it for next year.
Once upon a time, I might have considered that a threat, but now I'm interested, and I will actually sit with my husband and look through some of the older stuff. And he went to see it last night and came home just as excited as you.
Nice.
So
nice.
I'm very glad that we've had this talk, because now I can sort of talk to him a little bit about it and maybe go see it with him when he goes again. How many times have you seen it now?
I've seen it 3 times now. It premiered a bit earlier than in the rest of the world. So I went to the almost a world premiere on Tuesday evening. I rewatched it with actually a whole Protestant crowd on the next day, where I kind of basically gave them a short summary of what we've talked about here. And then yesterday I went to see it for myself. And I have to say, the movie gets better the more you see it. It was already amazing, but if you see it,
well, because after
it's like the Gospels, they return every year, and every time I see more, there's something new that you discover. Good stories are like that. The Lord of the Rings, you can read it, for your entire life. Star Wars is, to me, as a fan, definitely the same thing.
Okay, well, we'll have to talk about The Lord of the Rings sometime, because that's something I've never been able to stay awake through. So, but another time. Thanks so much for talking to me, Father Roderick, and looking forward to hearing more about Star Wars and all of your wonderful geekery that you share with us on the internet.
Thank you for your time. And I'm not going to say may the Force be with you, but may the Lord be with you.
Thanks be to God, and with you too.
And Merry Christmas already.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.